Alright, so YouTube has a 10-minute time limit, and it appears that maybe Windows Movie Maker has the same 10-minute time limit, because I got to 10 minutes and 25 seconds and it cut me off, even though I kept talking for like another 7 or 8 minutes. So I've got to redo all of this. Now, I don't, who knows what I said. But anyway, I've got these two other items on here. Okay, so we were interviewing one of the vendors that we're thinking about working with for this CFO project. After kind of talking about everything that we really needed to talk about, I felt like I just decided I wanted to talk a little about open source. I think that the vendor had mentioned something about having worked with some open source tools, platforms, etc. And I, just wanted to sort of pick his brain a bit about how he felt about using open source applications, developing using open source platforms, etc., etc. We wound up kind of talking a lot about what essentially were sort of like the hidden costs of implementing open source here, in the developing world in limited resource settings, and that really what it came down to, or one of the major sort of challenges, was the lack of human resources with the sort of knowledge and skills, the competencies around using open source tools, and that's either using existing sort of tools, MySQL or whatever, or even full-on applications that already exist, Drupal or something like this, or Joomla, is that Joomla open source? I don't know. But anyway, but actually, I digress. So using things like MySQL or Drupal, open source content management system, you all know, or even writing using open source languages, like Perl, for example, or PHP. And I'm really hoping that PHP's got to be open source. I know Perl is. Anyway, so yeah, the hidden costs of implementing open source in the developing world. It reminded me of this this meeting that was broadcast on the web a few weeks ago. Excuse me. This total cost of ownership, and I think it was was hosted by the World Bank. And I remember I found out about it. Someone I'm following on Twitter, John Camfield, I'm pretty sure that's his name, was talking about it, or had announced it, and so I thought it sounded interesting, and so I watched. And basically, one of the big take-home messages, at least that I sort of took home, was that in this analysis that was done, they found that implementing a Microsoft-based solutions. This is, I think, just for setting up computers in I think it was probably in primary schools. In the end, wound up costing just as much as it did to implement Linux-based solution, desktop or laptop or whatever solutions. And it really had to do with the fact that support, finding support locally was a huge issue, that those resources just did not exist. But that being said, one of the things I think that's interesting about that is that if costs are essentially equal, then your decision gets made based on other things. And I think the open source philosophy, the open source approach, that sort of shared, collaborative, transparent, yada 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 approach is preferable, to a closed sort of proprietary approach. And I think especially in the sort of in development work, it's really much more aligned with, I think, the ideas and the approaches and the goals, the desires, etc. So I just think it's interesting if cost winds up being thrown out of the equation, what are those other variables then that you look at? And one of them certainly is this sort of philosophical decision or philosophical dimension or something. That in some sense your decision to go the open source route says a lot about your values or something, your philosophy. Anyway, so that was kind of interesting. So I guess actually, in some ways, it just reaffirmed what I had learned in this TCO workshop meeting, or whatever you want to call it. And finally, the last one here, we had a meeting with this other group from Hopkins, CHAI, I think is how you say it, TSEHAI, and I'm not going to remember what that stands for, and I may even be pronouncing it incorrectly, but I'm sure the HA is HIV/AIDS, and who knows. Anyway, but basically, one of the things that they're doing is they're doing sort of telemedicine, right? So using a video conferencing platform. They twice every month, experts from the U.S., I think and sometimes multiple locations in the U.S., not just Hopkins, video conference with folks here in Ethiopia, and they go over 2 or 3 particularly interesting or challenging clinical cases. They go through diagnosis and treatment, management, etc., etc. They provide information about, they being the SMEs, provide additional or information about additional resources, journal articles and things, the newest evidence, the newest research, etc. That may not be available here. They also might talk about things that that have been discussed at recent conferences, etc. So it's an opportunity to do some knowledge update as well, and to sort of link the in-service providers here kind of with the with the world of research and that's going on. So what we were talking about were sort of opportunities for combining or coordinating some of our activities here with some of the things that they're doing. And so I think this could be very interesting. They're working, like I said, with in-service providers, but and we are doing work in service here, although I think at least right now our e-learning project is really focused on pre-service. So I think maybe there are opportunities to do this in a pre-service setting as well. I think that might be interesting. One of the things that they were talking about was it was hard to get people to attend, and I was thinking, well, hey, if this is somehow part of the university education, that these are students and they're going to class, if this is part of their class, then presumably they'll attend. You don't have to worry about taking them away from work and potentially paying them, which is what a lot of people have been asking for, etc. But it also, we were talking a lot about evaluation, and they were thinking about doing an evaluation, and this is sort of happening after they've already been doing this for a while, and so they're thinking to themselves, well, how do we go about evaluating this project? And I found myself asking, well, what is it that you are trying to do here? Like, when you do one of these sessions, what is it that you think you're doing? What are your objectives? So presumably whether it's explicit or not, might be tacit, but you have something in mind when you're doing this, some reason for doing it. So the idea was that that could at least be the beginning of what might become criteria for an evaluation. And my God, I'm at 9 minutes and 15 seconds. This is crazy. I'm just out of control here. So I think I'm going to pause this. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish. Or I'm going to edit all of this together somehow so that it's like 3 chunks or something. I don't know. But anyway, okay. I'm stopping this right here. I'm going to start again in a second.